Hi, everybody, and welcome to Friday Night Flock Talk. I'm Robin Sullivan of the Leather Elves, and I'm so excited to be here tonight. And while I was waiting to go live, I was watching that backdrop, and that forest no longer exists because Mark has cut down all that birch. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So I got to do the usual announcements. Hi, everybody. If you want to be notified when we go live, just like and follow us on Facebook, and you'll get those notifications. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can follow us on Instagram. So there's all different ways to catch Friday Night Flock Talk. And I know this is the most interactive way to do it is on Facebook. But if you don't have Facebook, there are other ways to do it. So lots of people are still signing on. I want to let you guys know that there's a lot happening here at the Leather Elves. We've got, some sales, and we've got an amazing guest tonight, and we're working on trivia for the Friday night for Black Friday. We're going to have a trivia contest. There'll be some prizes and some fun questions from some of our guests. So lots going on. But tonight, there you go. We're having a
Never
sale.
underestimate Santa's elves.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Nick. We've got a 40% off sale going on right now. It's for the month of November. You just enter code Santa and you get 40% off. It's a really good deal. We're also asking people to be patient with us. We're moving the elves, don't get a break. We don't have a warehouse, so they've got to build everything as you order it. So just if you haven't gotten your order yet and you've already placed it, just please be patient. Feel free to send us a message if you have questions, if you haven't ordered from us before and this is your first time. But yeah, everything is made to order. So tonight we have I have a very special guest. We've worked together before on a number of occasions. And I want to introduce Dr. Jason Crean. Hey, Jason, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. It's getting cold up here in Maine, though. I got to tell you, going out and getting that birch is getting rougher and rougher. Uh, but you know, um, so Jason and I are going to talk about foraging tonight, and I know we have talked about this. I wish I had like a nickel for every time that I've talked about foraging to bird people, and I'm sure you do too. But it's so important. And I was hoping that we can come up with some innovative ideas. And I hope people who are listening share some of their ideas how we can get our birds to forage more. So, Jason, for me, the definition of foraging is making a search for food. I want to trying to change that a little bit and say it's making a search, because for some of our birds, it's making a search for a favorite, part of a toy or something like that, but it's getting them moving. How would you define that?
So you're talking about the definition of foraging in part
Yes.
specifically. So um, biologically speaking, it's typically the search for food, but we're trying to capitalize and get birds to engage in naturalistic behaviors. So that should take any form we can possibly get it. So if it's hiding a toy or something like that, it's making them work and keep their minds active. I teach animal nutrition at the university as well as zoo biology, and in both of those courses, we talk a lot about um, foraging. And you've been a guest speaker in those courses, so you know. Um, but it's keeping nutrition. I always say 50% of nutrition is in up here. It's the mind. We got to keep their minds active because in the wild they're forced to do that, and that's what they've evolved to do. So now we have to capitalize on that and try to give them as many opportunities as we can to forage for whatever they find interesting.
And I don't know if she's listening tonight. I haven't seen her name come up. There is a woman that I have come across, have worked with her a little bit and made some suggestions. And her bird is exclusively foraging for her food. And it's, I'm thrilled by that because I think that if we can move in that direction, if we can get, you know, and one of the big stumbling blocks that I come across, and I don't know if you hear it from people as well, is that, my bird will starve. My bird's going to starve if I make him forage for his food. And I I get frustrated, because they're not gonna starve. I mean, it's like diet conversion, it's the same idea. They're gonna starve. And so, what do you say to people when someone says to you, "My bird, is gonna starve if I make him forage for stuff?"
Well, your bird is not this helpless, fragile creature. These birds have evolved for millions of years to become resilient, adaptive organisms because the wild is a really rough place. The wild is not some paradise where they fly free and they're just happy. They have to struggle for food, they have to watch for predators, they almost always have some kind of parasites. There's just a lot of stressors. So, but they've evolved to use their brain to problem solve. And so we want to give them those opportunities. And if they recognize the food items you're offering as food, then they can forage for them or whatever item that they're looking for.
And I think that's an important point, Jason, that you bring up is that they do need to recognize it as a food item. And some, that takes a little bit sometimes. And, foraging's not going to happen overnight. Recognizing new food items is not going to happen overnight. But if you kind of work with them and there's that learning curve that happens. And I always suggest to people that they start simple. And if the bird just like tears through it and yep, I've got this, I found it, I know where it is, then you move on, you increase the complexity. And I mean, is there any advice you would have for people as far as that's concerned? How do you start and how do you move forward?
So probably the biggest thing that people need to do is start to diversify the diet so that these birds recognize lots and lots of different foods as food. And I've often heard people say, well, if something happens to me, I want or something happens where we can't get food for the bird. I want to make sure that they always have this this dry food that I keep in the pantry just in case. The best thing you could do for your bird to prepare for whatever comes their way is expose them to as many different types of produce because those are always available at your grocery store, no matter where you go. And so that's really key is showing them and exposing them and giving them time and credit for learning, like you said,
Mhm.
the new foods. Because just because you throw a pepper in front of them and they don't touch it for the first time doesn't mean they won't. But it can take weeks for them to get accustomed, sometimes months or longer to get accustomed to new things. So if you really want to be kind to your bird, give them lots and lots of opportunities. You're going to waste food, compost it, do a good thing, compost it if it's wasted. But you're gonna waste some food as they learn. Um, but give them those opportunities so that they recognize lots, I mean, hundreds of different types of things as food.
Mhm. And I think that's important too, that learning piece, because it's they have evolved to be able to forage, to know, what that is. But now we've got birds that are being, bred in different way, in a completely different situation in a lot of cases, and they're not there's no request made of them to forage. It's here's your bowl. It's always in the same place, and that's where you'll find your food at 10 and 5, or definitely earlier than that because this daylight savings time, it's killing me. But it's that it's we don't request that, we don't ask that of them, and then all of a sudden we're like, now you have to do this. Okay, well, hold on. That's like being thrown into the deep end of the pool without, any kind of safety. And so it's that exposure, it's that giving them time to learn. They are a prey species as well. So, you know, it's like, "Oh, wait, I gotta be a little more careful about things than if you throw a big carnivore or something. They're probably gonna go after it a little quicker than your parrots." Um, but I noticed that Adrian mentioned that some of her birds prefer to work for food in a foraging cage or on a skewer instead of in their dish. And Jason and I have talked about this before. It's called contra freeloading. There have been studies done that animals would prefer to work for their food. And I can tell you, and it's funny, it's not just birds. I have we have an older Labrador, and he will stand and bark at his food bowl, and then he'll eventually eat it. And he takes it and carries it other places, and then eats it. But I bought one of those balls, it's like a Jolly ball, but with smaller holes, and I put his food in there. He is so happy just rolling that around the floor and waiting for the pieces to fall out. And for him, he licks and he has hot spots and he'll lick until he gets sores. While he's doing this foraging, he's not doing that. And, so that foraging, that seeking out food is a natural behavior that's replacing a behavior that happens because he lives in my house. And have you seen behavioral changes because of foraging or?
Yeah, I mean, as a zoo consultant, and you've worked with zoos too, it's pretty amazing that regardless of the species, if you challenge them, they'll rise to that challenge. Um, I think too many people want to treat their birds like little people and their dogs like little people, and want to make things easy because they think that they're being mean by giving them challenges. You're not. You're doing such a great thing for those animals. But just putting it in a bowl or on a plate, you need to challenge them more. They need to be thinking um, through things and trying to figure out like what are the best ways to get this food or what I want, right? And you're right. Like when you're replacing things, then those negative behaviors or undesirable desirable behaviors, whether it's screaming or whatever it may be when you have a parrot, are replaced by them being active and doing something else. And
Mhm.
I think that's why they make lick pads and all these other different things for dogs now, and the batting, um, the little batting things where the cat has to move the thing around to get to the food underneath. There's just all kinds of different things. But with parrots, they're because they eat so many different types of foods. I mean, the opportunities are endless.
And Jennifer mentions that her bird's on level 1. Well, yay, that's awesome. She has to put things in her bowl. She can mix non-food items in there to encourage her to forage for her fresh food, and that's great. I mean, you got to start somewhere. And I always joke with people, and they kind of think I'm teasing, but it's honestly the truth that you can move the food bowls. Don't tell the cage manufacturers, but you can move the food bowls. And, because it's in the wild, which is, where our birds have evolved from, there's not a certain one place that they go to eat every day. There is seasonally, we all go over here because this tree is in, season, or we all go over here because this grass has the best seed this month or whatever. But it changes, and they have to make this search. It's part of their survival. And we've taken that piece off, we've taken that piece away, and now we need to find ways to replace that. But Jennifer, that's great. And Laurie here says suggestions for changing up foraging for food, not treats for a blind bird. Just is there, Laurie, if there's a favorite food, what does that bird go for first? And then so if that bird will forage for treats, they'll forage for food too. Suggestions, Jason, as far as that's concerned?
Well, taking a page from your book, you got to look at their senses, right? So it could be that there's something that is aromatic, more aromatic. I find star anise pods. I find lavender flowers, things like that, peppermint, things that have a strong odor. Uh, Mixing that with food often will help them find it. And then touch and sound, like if you wrap it in paper, like plain craft paper bags or a plain craft paper box. I use those a lot. Those are the types of things, like they'll get used to that texture and know, okay, I remember food being in here, so I'm going to be drawn to that. So those are, oh wow, that's perfect. I forgot this picture was up. But yeah, this way there's some routine, but they still have to be challenged. And what you put in there with those recognizable items can change up as much as you want.
Mhm.
It'll be that star anise pod that they remember as a cue that, hey, there's food inside of here. What can I do to get to that? And then they start using that tongue to find things and search for things. Yeah, using those senses.
And, Laurie just said she uses cinnamon sticks for scent trails. That was going to be my next suggestion, was using a scent trail to get them to maybe a foraging bowl. And, we've said it doesn't have to be in the bowl, but you can create a foraging bowl. You can take a bunch of wooden balls, put it in a bowl, and put some food items in there. And then they've got to go through that. And Laura, you could definitely lead. Um, it's him, I think. Lead him to a foraging activity, and then once he gets there, following that scent trail, it doesn't have to be that treat. It can be just a foraging activity that, okay, he knows it's in there. And the scents are so important. For years and years, we were told that scent didn't matter to parrots. They do have a different respiratory system, and their olfactory processes different scents than we do. But it's absolute. I mean, Jason, I think you can attest to this as well.
Attest to what? Olfactory? The olfactory stuff?
to
Yeah.
the olfactory sensation and how important
Yeah.
it can be.
Well, you and I had a conversation a long time ago because some research had come out and said, well, shorebirds seem to have the largest olfactory bulb. And so that must mean that they use smell and that other birds don't. But, we're starting to see more and more that birds are wired differently when it comes to the nervous system. And I think that even though they have this smooth brain with no wrinkles, unlike ours, they still have some pretty dense neuron activity going on in there. So,
Mhm.
how they use that to think through things and sense the world around them, we're still figuring out. But I think that, yeah, I mean, they clearly can smell. Um, and I think that they're probably more apt to pick up on plant oils and things like that we would smell, like peppermint. I see birds react to peppermint very quickly. Lavender. I mean, just offering some of the blends that we've created with lavender in them, just the smell of it seems to calm birds down. And that's not one
Mhm.
person telling me that. That's very, very consistently hearing that. And so, yeah, this is one of our blends, and we get items directly from the wild, from the Indonesian Parrot Project, and we mix these in with other things like Lori's cinnamon sticks. We use Ceylon cinnamon because we do see birds eat bark in the wild, and that's a great addition to something. Even if they don't eat it, they're still interacting with it, and they're smelling it, and they're tasting it, they're feeling it. Um, so those are the different types of flowers and textures and colors. This is the larger blend that has large rattan nuts, which are those little pine cone looking things. Those are things that they offer parrots in their program so that they know what to eat when they're released into the wild. Same thing with
Mhm.
the tamarin pods there. Um, they feed them a lot of bananas and papaya and things like that. So giving them a lot of those different things, they're going to sense them in different ways.
And I think too, I personally, and I know we don't want to anthropomorphize, but think about yourself, and you don't use your mouth as much for the way parrots do. I mean, their tongues and their beaks, and just another it's another hand or a foot, and exactly.
I have hands. Yep.
And this is what we use, for to kind of check things out, to check out the texture. When you're presenting foraging, one of the things you really want to think about is what are the different textures you're offering? Because for me, I'm a very textural eater. I need something crunchy at every meal or I am not happy. And Mark is a very visual eater. If it doesn't, that doesn't look good, I'm not eating it. He's not even going to try. And I think he's listening, and I'll hear about this later. But the we kind of need to work all those things in. I mean, when I used to do a talk called "Use Your Common Senses." Enrichment, use your common senses. And one of the things I challenge people to do was to try to incorporate as many senses in one enrichment opportunity as you can. And when you're doing foraging, um, when you're sorry, I'm reading comments at the same time. When you're doing foraging, you want to see how many you can incorporate. Jason was talking about the visual and the colors, and yeah, that's the one I was laughing at. I'll be waiting on those cookies, Frank. I'm just saying. Um, but when you look at something, and when you look at a bird's environment, where they come from, there's so many different visuals that they're taking in at all times. And when they're foraging, there are different colors that they're looking for. So you've got to incorporate that color. You've got to incorporate the texture. I mean, not everything is going to be easy breezy to eat. Maybe they have to break something open. So we're back to the contra freeloading. We're back to working for their food. That's a form of that. And so if you can put all that in, and you can put in the olfactory with the scents, and Michelle said that, it also calms mom down too. So, bonus, you get calm because you're feeding your bird something that's aromatic. All of that together is what you're looking for when you're trying to create a foraging opportunity. So, um, the Adrian says shape and size too. I mean, vary it. It's just like Jason said. I mean, you mentioned. I mean, how many different food items is a bird going to come across in, say, a year's time? I mean, do we
Hundreds.
have any idea?
I
100.
mean, potentially hundreds, depending on where they're at, if it's seasonal. Um, it's interesting because the more we are seeing and learning about different species in different places, just parrot wise alone, um, small changes in the environment can lead to new foods blooming and things like
Yeah.
that. So and the things that birds eat. I posted a video early today of macaws eating mushrooms in the Pantanal in Brazil, and we know that parrots all over the world consume fungus. They consume mushrooms like we consume edible mushrooms. Um, some people are like, well, I heard they were toxic. Well, toxic mushrooms are toxic. Like, don't feed those. But you have, like these birds are actively, they're trying to get around on this weird tree stump looking thing with mushrooms on them, and they're trying to perch and balance on them and try to get to those mushrooms and eat them. Like that's exercise first of all, which we don't our birds typically don't get enough of. And exercise does not equal flying alone. There's tons of exercise birds can do without ever flying. And, usually you can pair that with foraging pretty easily. And so, there's just lots of different ways to do this, but birds encounter all kinds of different foods. In the wild, there's a lot of nutrient poor foods that they're consuming and surviving. But in our homes, we can thrive. We can get them to thrive, which means
Yeah.
giving them really the ultimate and getting them to live a lot longer with us than they would in the wild.
Hmm. I when you talk about how we're going to get them to do this, how we're going to get them to forage. Mary says use foraging by hiding the food in a toy. Absolutely. I mean, I remember I've done a lot of workshops in stores, and I was at Kiko's Toy Chest out in the Pacific Northwest, and I tasked the group with finding a foraging toy. So they all kind of went to this one section where there were more foraging toys than not. And a couple of people, couldn't find one, and they just picked up something and they said, well, I don't know, I don't think this is right. Any toy can become a foraging toy, any toy at all. You drill a hole, you put a nut in there, you do. It's I think we overthink foraging. Like, you and I are talking for a whole hour about foraging, but I think people go, oh, I don't have time, I just don't have time to do foraging every day, I don't have time to offer that. It will give you more time. It's for any of you out there who have had toddlers or interacted with toddlers, it's the same thing. You can keep them busy and tire them out. I've got people who are like, oh, my bird won't go to bed. My bird won't, um, you know, leave me alone at night. And okay, so you set up a whole bunch of foraging activities. They're going to do that. It's like an Easter egg hunt every day, where the birds can find these things, and really get that exercise. I mean, you mentioned our birds don't get enough exercise. Um, so Ray's bird loves your tea. I was going to say Ray loves your tea, but she probably does because birds do. And
They're
she
all
wants to
human
know how you
beings.
came about. But it's definitely a matter of offering different opportunities and changing it up and variety. We look at
Well,
those
and
those
it can be
boxes.
cheap. It can be
Say
cheap,
say that
right?
again?
Like
Yeah.
it can be cheap. Plain paper lunch bags and little paper cups. You can shove all kinds of stuff in there and crumple it up and throw it in the bottom of the cage, or even better, on the top of the cage, so the bird has to exercise and hang upside down to get to those things. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It doesn't have to be expensive. No one is gatekeeping foraging. Anyone
Yeah.
can do it. It's nice and cheap. And sometimes it's even like a matter of throwing in shell nuts on top of the cage and letting them try and crack them and pull them through, because that's what they're doing in
Yep.
the wild. They're reaching for things. They're trying to break them apart. They're trying to eat them. And plants defend themselves in the wild. Like they don't make things easy. They're toxic. Birds eat lots of toxic stuff and then have to you know uh, do all kinds of things. To get that food. But there's lots of different types of ways that are cheap.
Jennifer says she takes a piece of tissue, wraps up a couple of blueberries, and her bird has to get them out. So you're
Yep.
past level one. And if blueberry, I think your statement there about blueberries are her favorite fruit, there's the key. So you start with that thing that's the favorite fruit, the thing that's the favorite nut, and that goes in foraging. And then they're
Yep.
like, "Oh wait, I do this thing and I get my favorite thing." It's kind
Mhm.
of an if then. If I look for the food, then I get my favorite. Um, Put a thin coffee filter around the food bowl with some holes when you're feeling, Claudia, that's not
Uh,
lazy. That's straight up foraging.
Unbleached coffee
It works.
filters. They're cheap.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, and just the only thing I caution is just make sure whatever you're using is a safe material, that it's not, something that's got, chemicals on it, or that's got, use paper, any kind of paper, as long as I suggest not shiny. A whole pistachio, um, Jennifer, trust me, she will get okay, so you're at least making her take them out of the shell. Proud of you, point
Yep.
for that. Um, just put a little hole in it. So we do, leather elves do, nut rings, and they have a little tiny hole because we drill them to put them on the wire. And people are like, This is the first time my bird's ever opened a nut." Well, because they had a starter hole. So just a little tiny hole, and then have them work at it. Those beaks are built for that. Jason, when you put things in your foraging blends, um, things that they need to open to get to the prize. Does that happen?
Hmm. Yeah. So there's
Yeah.
We try to capitalize on natural items. So like I said, in the Go Wild stuff, where we're actually sourcing stuff that is sustainably sourced from Indonesia by the people on the ground who are doing the conservation work. Those nuts, and it's incredible because the first time I gave my pound cockatoo, my Sirius Black, he got his first Rotan nut. He picked that thing up like he has been eating these for eons. It's like they've co-evolved with these trees and know exactly what to do. But it's the same thing with mealworms too. Like I can't tell you the number of birds who had never seen a mealworm before, and when I give them a mealworm, they pick it up and they just eat it. I have a canary wing parakeet here that was hand reared by a friend of mine. Never saw a mealworm. I gave it a mealworm, and that thing just ate it like it was a pro. Like no, it was absolutely amazing. But it's all because they're wired to do these things, and they recognize they have ways of recognizing these things that we probably can't see ourselves because of UV light reflectance and things like that. But when we put stuff
Yeah.
in, I want birds to have to rummage through stuff they don't want to get what they do want. I want them to have to open things like tamarind pods. They have to open the pod to get to the gooey, sugary insides, or get to the nuts like that. That in of itself is rewarding to them and me to watch that.
So I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna throw in the dad joke. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, but
Okay, sorry. I just had to. So Joanna is asking, what is the pine cone looking thing?
that's a Rotan nut.
Okay.
That's right from
And then
Indonesia. Yep.
Michelle says that she puts things just outside the cage and Shadow has to
Mm-hmm.
reach through and pull them in. And she found this out by accident because he pulled things off her desk. So now she uses it to her advantage. And I
Yep.
think some of that does happen, when you observe and, you know, we, like Jason said in the beginning, we treat them, kind of like they're going to break, and they're not China dolls. They are very resilient and you'd be amazed at what they can figure out, what they can open, um, and be successful with that, we're, "Oh, it's a little too difficult." And, Jennifer asked, she said, "Could her bird's a small bird, and could she crack a walnut?" Walnut comes with a zipper on it, pretty much. I mean, it's there's that line that goes down the side of a shell. A walnut is probably one of the easiest nuts for them to open. The almonds are easy. The shell isn't as hard. But I mean, what do you think, Jason? I think she could. What kind of bird is it, Jennifer?
It's a sun conure, I think, because it's on her shoulder
Oh,
there. But yeah, I don't think
okay,
they
yeah,
can. I don't think they can crack it. But you could start it.
right.
That's something I've done for a long time. Eclectus, not the greatest nut crackers when it comes to some of those thicker, bigger nuts. But just starting it, so it's already
Mhm.
started, and then they do the rest, or just cracking it and just throwing the whole mess into a bowl or foraging, let them weed through it and extract the meat from the nut. Um,
Yeah.
no matter what, it's a win.
There you go. And so it's that little start. And it doesn't mean, take it all the way apart. And nobody's doing that for them. Nobody is opening things for them. So the nut ring has, and Michelle mentioned she can't imagine that thank you, Nick.
There it is.
This is why I love Nick. He makes magic happen every Friday night or every time we go live. But Michelle said she can't imagine that Shadow wouldn't just eat all of them at once. And yes, that is an issue. When I first started selling them many, many years ago, I was at one of my first sales calls and I was putting all my toys out on the counter in the store. And I put a Brazil nut on the counter and I turned and I started talking to the owner and I turned back and there was a macaw and there were just Brazil nut shells. There was no nut ring left. So, you don't want to leave it in there, Michelle. I consider like nut rings to be a kind of a play stand option or a top of the cage option so that you can take it away without losing a hand. And kind of meter it that way. So Jennifer says live or dried mealworms, Jason.
So my favorite's live, not just for foraging and enrichment, but because there's a lot of nutritional benefits in live mealworms. And you can even put them in the sun, expose them to sunlight, and they will create vitamin D3 that your bird can consume. So if you live in an area where you can't get your bird outside often for natural unfiltered sunlight, that's one way to give them vitamin D3 in a natural way. This mix here is our forthcoming blend that are freeze dried pellets. No, they're 100% whole food, freeze dried, so they maintain most of their nutrient, no heat treated at all, nothing processed, with dried berries, dried worms, and things like that. These are freeze dried worms because freeze drying maintains about 95% of the nutrient. So most of the time when you see dried mealworms on a shelf, they've been just dried and they lose a lot of nutrients. So freeze dried is always better. But this is coming.
Michelle says, "Is anyone else getting squeamish?" They're not as creepy as they appear.
Birds aren't.
Trust me.
The birds don't.
No, the birds think they're wonderful. Um, so apparently Zorro will not eat mealworms. But
But it says
they're
one.
so great. There you
That
go.
comment said one. Got to give them more opportunities.
Yes, absolutely. Well, are flukers freeze dried?
Fluker, I believe Flukers has both.
Okay.
So you got to make sure
Okay.
it's freeze dried.
Yeah, it's definitely, and that's the thing too. When there's a lot, we've been talking about trying different foods and a lot of things and getting them to forage through for favorites and things like that. You've got to make sure that you're sourcing them from good places, that it's not, um, just be careful when you're purchasing different food items, where you're getting them from. That's just something to keep in mind. So, Jason, your boxes. Can we bring that picture up again, Nick? Yeah, there we go. So talk to us about these.
So this is what you see mixed in there is our Blissful Bounty, Biodiversity Blissful Bounty. We're all about alliteration. So we use a lot of B's at Biodiversity Bird Blends, just in case you couldn't tell. But this is Biodiversity Bird Blends Blissful Bounty. Say that 5 times fast. And that mix has a lot of different. So when I'm looking for a mix, I'm trying to figure out how can I get the maximum number of colors, lots of different textures, different sizes, and both food items and non-food items. So what I did in this blend here was we have dehydrated oranges. We have I know I just love the taste of blood oranges, but we have dehydrated oranges, dried flowers of different kinds, especially calendula. That's those orange yellow flowers in there. Those are very high in beta carotenes. So a great way to up your bird's vitamin A in their body is to give them beta carotene rich foods like these flowers, as well as freeze dried apples, Ceylon cinnamon, and then non food items are those mahogany pods in there. We have bakuli pods, which are these big, really tough seed pods that they can destroy. But I want them to have like as many different sizes, textures, colors. There's freeze dried pumpkin and squash in here, all kinds of different things so that they can not only pick out the things they like, but they have to move other things around to get to those things. And then putting them in these simple craft boxes, these have no glue or anything like that. You just fold them and they hold together through folding. That they can access it from really any side, top included. Just an easy way to get them working for it.
Yeah. And I think, when you're talking about that, I was thinking, when you're feeding fresh, part of foraging is big pieces, and
Mhm.
you see different sizes and things like that. And, when you're offering a pumpkin or you're offering, I did 2 weeks ago, we did produce for parrots. And when you're offering a squash or something like that, not making sure, it all fits in the bowl. Sometimes it's great to have the whole thing, so they have to go at it. I can tell you, they're not parrots, but the wild birds in my neighborhood have really decided that my pumpkins are, just a brand new bird feeder. So, that works. But some other methods, shadow would be way too focused on the bowl. You can, Michelle, you could put any of these mixes in, you could put them in the bowl. You'd be focused on the box. You can put them in the bowl. You can put them in the pods. We do a lot of toys with the little pods on them. And you can put stuff in there. You can put stuff in um, different wooden cups, things like that. And so it's really about, um, so it's not easily accessible. A baffle cage, things like that. A dog bowl. That's a great idea, Melissa. I find that sometimes dog products are cheaper than bird products. Let's be honest. There are more. Well, there really aren't. I was going to say there are more of them than us, but um, any way you want to offer these. I mean, what do you guys suggest, Jason, as far as how to present these mixes to people, to your birds?
Um, any way the bird will access them. I hate to limit it because different birds have different foraging behaviors depending on the species and their experience, things like that. So it could be that you put it in a bowl or a plate or something like that first so that they can, forage through it. Um, you put it in a bowl or a plate at the table when you're eating your meal so that they have something to do while that social thing. Don't feed them off your plate. Most of what we eat is not parrot friendly. Do not feed them meat or chicken bones. I'm so tired of hearing that. So, giving them that social time when you're feeding. Um, Putting it inside of foraging boxes or foraging toys, those pods that you have, those little cups. I love those
Mhm.
for toucans. Putting blueberries in there, whole blueberries for toucans, and they just will spend all day trying to wheedle those out of those pods. Um, so there's so many different ways to do it. Yeah, there's just a lot
You
of
know,
ways. But even like we said, even putting it in a paper bag or a paper cup and crumpling it up, let
yeah.
them pull it apart like a pinata. Whatever it takes.
And I think that's, another thing. Well, 2 good suggestions came up. Michelle said she'll put it on a coconut shell. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I love it because then there's that extra textural dynamic of the little, fibers on the outside of the coconut shell. And then Adrian said put it in a, brown paper lunch bags, things like that. And that's where you get, so I think it was Jennifer who said that she was at level 1. So level 1 is in the paper bag with it open. Roll down the paper bag, put something in there, and then okay. So then they figure out that's a food item. That's where food comes from at this point. And then you close the top of the bag, and then you put the blueberries in the tissue in the bag. So you can just keep adding levels of complexity. And the other thing, and this is, I get people tell me all the time how mean this is. Um, head first in the bag. That's what we're looking for, Michelle. We're looking for that head first in the bag because it's so worth it to do that, to go that extra effort to get stuff out. Um, but people always say to me, I suggest sometimes you can put the bag or the tissue in there without anything in it. I'm horribly mean, but that's reality, that foraging doesn't always provide success. And so you've got to make sure there are those reinforcers for the behavior, because that's the one thing I love about foraging. It is inherently reinforcing. You don't have to do anything to reinforce that behavior because the food item that's in there is going to reinforce that behavior. They're going to do it. So positive reinforcement. You've added something that is going to increase the chance that that will happen again. That's it. Foraging is the definition of positive reinforcement. So I don't know. And it's fun. It's a way to interact, and it's a way to get them moving. The with the bags. I don't know about you, Jason, but I like hanging like the paper bags and stuff from the top of the cage or somewhere where they've got to. It's not right there on the table or right there in the bottom. If it's an arboreal forager, hang it in the cage. Yeah, we don't always get what we want. It's true.
Well, and there's benefits. I like hanging. We use coffee filters too, and we'll put the dry bird teas, the blended teas that we sell for the birds now. We'll put those in a coffee filter and then tie them with a piece of your leather because that seems to last forever. So I use them off of old toys and things like that, and just tie it above their food, their water bowl. And so
Mhm.
as they chew and destroy that, the tea's falling into the water, and then they're drinking the tea. So it's a slow way to like actually get them exposed to the tea. Because some birds, you put tea in there for the first time, and they kind of look at the bowl like, "What are you trying to do to me?" Um, and so that's one way that you can get them foraging, but also introduce new things.
So Ray said that I'm going to go back a little bit. Ray says, unfortunately, her U2 keeps throwing out the freeze dried mealworms from your package, and she keeps putting them back in his food dish until he recognizes it as food. Any suggestions?
Yeah, persistence.
Yeah.
That's what it takes. You are smarter
You
than
know,
your bird. You are smarter than your bird. If you have to sit in front of a mirror and say that to yourself 100 times a day, please do so. You are smarter than your bird. You can outwit them.
mhm. And Kim is wondering if it's safe for her bird to take a bath in the tea.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And birds do that in the
Uh,
wild. They don't. There's and Robin, you're part of our webinar lineup. We have a 16-part webinar that we're doing to raise money for avian preservation. And oh boy, he's faster than I couldn't even get the word out.
good.
But we have speakers from around the world on this webinar series. There's still time to sign up. You can click. I guess you can take a picture of that QR code and register. You can get access to all of them as recordings as well. For at least a year after the event is over. But we've already had a few sessions. We have another one tomorrow morning, but Robin will be on. And one of the things, our second speaker was Jade Welch, who's a wildlife photographer who studies parrots in the wild in Australia. And he showed us pictures of what birds drink. There is no Brita pitcher in the wild. There's no filter. Like they're drinking from these puddles and rain catches up in the canopy that are full of plant components leaching into the water. So they're drinking tea. And so we're trying to replicate that. And we've seen the benefits of tea because all those health benefits that we know teas have apply to the animals that we keep. And I'm not just talking about birds. So
Right.
there's a lot of benefits to tea. I'll be forever indebted to Dr. Karen Becker for introducing tea for animals to us about 20 years ago when we first started this. And there's, it's not just the taste of tea, but it's the smell, the textures, everything. It's all beneficial.
Yeah, it's definitely, and that's another way. I mean, so the items that fall down into the water bowl. Now you're talking again, it's just a different texture. It's the same as if you put it in a bowl, if you put it in a foraging item, if you put it in, on you sprinkle it on top of food. Now it's the same item, but it's a different texture. It's a little squishier, maybe. It's a little, it's just different ways. And Melissa says that Dana puts tea in Zorro's chop. And that's another way to offer it. But it's absolutely about discovering that. I always joke that, you say it's like real estate, location, 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 um, not making it easy, scattering things around. The other thing, and you mentioned a little bit, Jason, is toy cups. Oh yeah, they do like having to work, Jennifer, and I appreciate you using our foraging toys. But as far as so there's that location piece, and but you mentioned different birds forage in different ways, and I think that's something that we really do need to keep in mind when we're talking about foraging, because I was consulting at a zoo and they were building a new uh, aviary, and one of the species that they got in was a ground forager. That's what they did. And they had all these great platforms that they had built, and they were putting the dietary trays up on these platforms. And I came in, and one of the keepers said to me, I don't know what's wrong. This bird he's new, but he's not eating. And I said, well, what are you feeding? And he told me, and the diet was perfectly adequate. And he said, I said, well, how are you presenting it? And he said, um, right up there. It's up there on that platform. And that was the issue. This bird was not a bird that was going to seek out food up above, above the ground. They were going to seek out food on the ground. And not all parrots forage in the same way. And toucans are. It's really about knowing how your bird forages, and that's very easy to find out. If you have a parrots of the world, that'll tell you where they feed is how they put it. So yeah, I mean, when you're offering that, I mean, a lot of our birds are conditioned to get things that are hanging just because that's what we've trained them to do.
Mm.
But you want to be careful if you've got, cockatiels. African grays do both. They are arboreal and ground foragers. So you want to think about where they're going to forage. There was a question for you, um, Jason, about how long will the tea be available before we worry about changing?
So I give tea with fresh food in the morning. And then when I pull whatever's left of the fresh food, if there's anything left of the fresh food, after work, so about 8 hours or so, then I pull the tea and they have fresh, clean water the rest of the night.
Um, Lorraine says that her green wing has stainless steel pails hanging from the ceiling and cardboard boxes, and they put food, so she has to pull them up from the floor to the ceiling. I love it. That's a behavior that I've trained with some parrots where they do have to pull something up, and it's definitely fun. Um, and so getting that increased activity. So if they've got to haul that up, that's not asking a lot to get them to get their food. Um, but Michelle
Well,
mentioned
and
she used to
yeah,
get wheat. Go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say, you don't even have to do like peer-reviewed scientific research to figure out how your bird forages. You could do a Google
Right.
image search of them, and you will see pictures of them in the wild doing things. And
Mhm.
you'll be hard pressed to not find pictures of like white cockatoos, for example, all over the ground because they literally uproot grasses and eat the roots and soil and like I mean they just make a mess. So then think about okay, what can I do to mimic this environment,
Mhm.
right? So give them a tray, and you can get stainless steel cookie trays and put them on the ground and scatter all kinds of stuff in there, and throw
Yeah.
strips of paper on top so they have to move things around. There's just when I was asked to speak in New Zealand at a bird conference a few years ago, pre-pandemic, everything's pre-pandemic, but one thing I took some time and the host took me to the Auckland Zoo and we had seen how they allow their birds to forage and they use a lot of
Mhm.
whole food items, all fresh produce and things like that. And they have these trays, I have pictures of them somewhere, but these metal trays that are all over the ground, and the birds go down and they interact all over these trays and pull in food and all kinds of stuff. So of there's a lot to be learned about the birds you have, and those behaviors don't go away. They're hardwired up here because they've
Mhm.
evolved to have these behaviors to survive in the wild. So we need to make sure that we're using that knowledge to give them biologically appropriate foraging opportunities and biologically appropriate food items.
And I consulted at Auckland Zoo many, many years ago, and yeah, they do an incredible job with what they're feeding and how they're feeding it. Um, Nancy has a question. Fresh food, is fresh food okay all day left in a bowl? I would love to do that, but thought it's not okay.
Yeah, fresh food is not going to go bad in 8 hours. You should only be feeding a portion size that they're going to eat within the first couple of hours anyway. And then typically they're done. Most birds, I mean, birds don't, they're not going to eat 24 hours a day. Like we know that they're not going to eat 24 hours a day. So portion control is really important. You should be considering how much will my bird eat in the first hour or two. But fresh food is not going to spoil. Like if you leave a salad out during the day, you don't come home and it's covered in mold. That just doesn't happen. But cooked food does. Cooked food does spoil because when we heat food, we kind of destroy its natural defenses. And so, you'll read about people dying after eating, rice that had been left out overnight because of this bacteria called B. cereus. So those are, like we know those things exist. So avoid cooked food. There's no reason to feed cooked food of any kind. Focus on fresh foods. Those foods will not go bad while you're at work or school or whatever you do during the day. And try to only give them enough food for the first couple of hours. And portion control is really important because if you just give them tons and tons of food, they're only going to pick out what they like and then leave the rest.
Well, and they're gonna throw it on the ground, and then people are gonna say, "Oh, I wasted all
That's
this
always going
food,"
to happen.
and I think that's a lot of the food that gets wasted is our fault because we do the food is love. I'm gonna load up this bowl, I'm gonna load up this whatever, and my bird's gonna love me even more.
Yep.
Well, no, they're just gonna throw stuff on the floor and you're gonna get mad. But I do think that people just I mean, and look at you can tell if something's it depends on where you live. Up here, you're gonna have ice cubes if you leave your fresh food outside. Down at your place, not so much. So, it's definitely about where you are and what the environment is, how long you're gonna leave that. But, there's so much. I kind of knew that we would evolve into, um, not just straight up foraging, but I really appreciate everyone's, suggestions of what they're doing. And, you are more than welcome to post on the Leather Elves page on Facebook things that you're trying, different things that you've done. And, share with the people that you see on these live streams, share with the people that you meet, the birch discs. Thank you, Michelle. We love getting them to shadow. So, and like I said, that forest no longer exists. Um, Very rural and in the fresh is poor. So Kim uses fresh frozen food. The Jason, do you have comments on that or?
So most frozen food, I don't know if she means she freezes her own or if she purchased it, but most frozen foods have been heated already, so that's not really fresh, unfortunately. But the best thing you can do if you don't have access to a grocery store close by is sprout. Get dry sprouting seeds. You can buy them in bulk. You can sprout every single day. Some of it is just a matter of soaking overnight and then rinsing in the morning and feeding right away. There's lots of different options. Sprouting is super simple and a lot of nutrient dense. You can also grow microgreens in 5 to 7 days on a windowsill. And those are extremely nutrient dense. They're actually, those little tiny leaves are actually more nutritious than the adult plant. So kale microgreens are actually better than a big leaf of kale, though a big leaf of kale is fun for a lot of birds, especially if it's wet. Some of them like to bathe in it before they start destroying it. So, those are great foraging, but you can do all of that at home very, very
Mhm.
simply.
And the when you mentioned the microgreens, Jason, that's also, I mean, that's easy breezy foraging. That's,
Mm-hmm.
that's what they do. And by offering that and offering those fresh sprouts, you definitely are asking them to work a little bit. So, just again, it's easy. So again, we could go on and on. but we're at an hour, so I'm gonna call it. And thank you so much, Jason. And thank you guys again for being here. I just want to remind you of the sale. Um, I mentioned it at the beginning, just now we'll mention it again. The Leather Elves, we've got this sale going on, 40% off for the month of November. Enter code Santa. If you've already ordered and you're waiting, thank you for your patience. We're working on them. And we also, I just want to let you guys know too, we are not doing a live stream next Friday. I have completely overscheduled myself for next week. So we are doing one on Black Friday, though. We will be doing a trivia extravaganza, and there will be some prizes. There'll be trivia questions from different guests that we've had on. And so hopefully I will see you all then. It'll be 7 o'clock on Black Friday, trivia night. Jason, I know you have an announcement you want to make.
Yeah.
Um, so,
So we have a product. That's priceless. We have a product announcement. We created a Christmas blend, a holiday blend for birds, and we only have 50 units. So the first 50 people to order, that's it. We won't have any more. But what you see here is a foraging blend that includes these freeze dried cookies, we're calling them. They have peppermint, all whole food and freeze dried, no heat, no cooking, no baking. It's all fresh, freeze dried food. The foraging mix also has some freeze dried fruits and like cranberries and oranges. And then we also have in there some dried things like figs, pine cones, untreated pine cones, anise pods, some flowers, um, things things like that. Ceylon cinnamon, because what it can't be the holidays without some cinnamon. And then you also get a bag of our Peace on Earth tea, which is really just our return to peace tea. It's very calming, but we call it Peace on Earth tea for the holiday. And that has a lot of peppermint in it. So there's tea and cookies and foraging, and you get that little house, that foraging house, that box, so that your bird can you can put that in there and let your bird destroy it in order to get to the goodies inside. So that's our package that we have. And any orders over $200 get free shipping with the code free ship, all capital letters, just one word, free ship.
all right. So the thank you. That's really exciting. And I kind of think that, those foraging blends that you've got would look kind of cool in some of the Leather Elves foraging toys. So I think this is a match made in I'm not sure exactly where, but it's a match made somewhere. And it's always a pleasure, Jason, talking to
Well,
you.
and I have to,
And
I have to, I have to say this, Robin, because you are so important to me. I've known you for years, and you know as well as I do that I did a lot of this formulating for other businesses, and until January of this year, I had never done it for myself. So when we finally launched Biodiversity Bird Blends, you were there the night we launched it. We did it live. You remember that? Remember being
I
here?
do.
So like
I
you helped
do.
launch this and give it its start, and we've raised lots of money for the animal nutrition lab at the university as well as the Avian Preservation and Education Conservancy. So we really really appreciate it.
I so appreciate what you're doing as well because I'm always trying to encourage people to have their birds forage, and you're providing something for them to forage for. And so it
Mhm.
definitely works. We've got a couple questions. When will you have the out of stock items back in?
I don't know what's out of stock. I'll have to check after.
And then can you order, oh, can they order extra of the little house boxes? She wants him to be able to decorate one.
We have those foraging boxes that we had the Blissful Bounty in before. Those it had like the little sun on there. I'm sure he's going to probably put it. There it is. We have those available on there on the website.
Okay. I think she's looking for the little gingerbread house looking one.
Yeah, those we only have enough for the package for the Christmas blend for that package.
Okay. All right. We'll work on that, Michelle. I'll work on that for you. I'll try. And which reminds me that I did offer. I suggested that I might be doing a DIY workshop in November, but like I said, I've way overscheduled myself, so that's not going to be happening. But I am going to do my very best to have a DIY workshop sometime in December. So keep your eyes on the Leather Elves page for that. And hopefully we'll be announcing that soon. And we can, get together and we had the last workshop we had was great fun. There was a lot of sharing that happened. And so I want to thank everybody that helped make that happen. So, all right, we're going to let you guys go. Enjoy your weekend. And we will, hopefully you'll get on that website and get some biodiversity bird blends and on the Leather Elves, get some toys to put those bird blends in. And we will see you soon, Jason. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.